Hi everyone. Let's say that you're very careful with your measurements and you determine the correct number of sig figs to record, but now what do you do when you multiply those numbers together or divide them? So for instance, when we measure density, we're going to be dividing numbers. We're dividing measurements, and you have to know how many sig figs to keep. Your calculator is going to spit out all these decimal places, and you shouldn't use them all, okay? It's very rare that you're going to have that much precision. So here's some rules for how to know what to round your final answer to. All right, rounding. We're just going to use the 5 and up rule. So if you have a number where it's followed by a 5, then you're going, or higher than 5, you're going to round up, and less than 5, you round down. So for example, right here, 0.067556, we want 2 digits. So what I'm going to do is highlight, or let's see, bracket. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to use 2 digits. I want 2 sig figs. So remember, this 0 doesn't count, and that 0 just tells me there's a decimal place here, point here. Okay, so now I'm going to look at the following number, and it is indeed a 5. I don't need to look at this 5 and this 6 at all. I'm just going to look at this 5. I'm going to round this 7 up to 8. Okay, so there's my 2 sig figs. If I want this number to 3 sig figs, I'm going to bracket off the first 3, and I'm going to look at this number, and it is a 5, so I'm going to round the 4 up to a 5, and I'm going to have 3 total sig figs. All right, now let's get to what to do with multiplying and dividing. If you have measurements, and these should all have units on them, by the way, but they don't, okay, but let's say that they did. They're measurements, and you have 3 sig figs, 5 sig figs, and 2 sig figs. You're going to be limited in your answer by your least number of sig figs. And the reason for that is because your uncertainties are multiplying, so your uncertainties are getting big just by the fact that you're multiplying. And you can't have an answer that's more precise than your least precise measurement, right? So we're just going to round to our least precise one. So 3, 5, and 2. 2 sig figs is our least precise number. So we're going to round our final answer to 2 sig figs. So what I would do in writing this at the beginning, if you've never done this before, just go through and identify how many sig figs do you have. I have 3, I have 5, and I have 2. Yep, that 0 counts, remember? Okay, otherwise I wouldn't have written it down. So we've got 3, 5, and 2. I go with the least number of sig figs, so that's how I know I want to keep 2 digits. Then I look at this number, and it's less than 5, so I just keep 45. All right, and that goes for dividing as well. Let's say we take 4 sig figs here, and I divide by 3 sig figs. Then I want to keep 3 sig figs. 1, 2, 3. This is higher than 5, so I'm going to round up to 6. So there it is. When you're adding and subtracting, then you go by your decimal places. Okay, so here I have 2 decimals, 3 decimals, 3 decimals. Well, my least precise number is 2 decimals. So I'm going to round this to 2 decimals. So I'm going to bracket this off, and I'm going to look at the 4. Less than 5, so I just drop it. All right, same thing when you subtract and add. This is sort of mixed up. But even if you're just subtracting numbers, you still go by 3, 1, and 2. I need to have 1 decimal place. So I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to round it up. Okay. Now if you have multiple operations, then you need to follow Pemdas, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So I'm going to do this first. I'm going to have subtraction, so I go by decimal places. So I'm going to have 2 decimal places here. All right, 0.479. And then I'm going to say that I have 2 decimal places that I should have. But instead of rounding it right now to 0.48, I'm going to go ahead and just keep that. But I'm going to keep in mind that I should round to 2 digits eventually, so I'm going to make the 9 sort of small because I want to keep track that I have the 9, but that it's going to be rounded off later. So, because if I round here, I'm going to get a different number than if I don't round here. And we always say we round at the very end. So that's what this means, is keep all your digits, but keep track of how many technically you should be using for rounding at the end. Okay, so I don't know if that makes sense, but okay, so now I'm going to do my multiplication, and I'm going to follow the multiplication rule, which is 3 sig figs, 4 sig figs, and 2 sig figs. Even though I have the 9 there, I'm going to use it, but I'm going to round it off to 2 sig figs. Okay, so using the rounding rules, I have 3 sig figs, 4 sig figs, and 2 sig figs. I'm going to go with 2 sig figs. So there we go. So this 1 doesn't get rounded to 2, so don't worry about anything past the 1. The 1 is less than 5, so this is 19. Okay, last example, I'm going to do the parentheses first. 5.4 times 0.916. What rule do I use here? Do I go by least number of sig figs or least number of decimal places? I go by least number of sig figs because I'm multiplying. So let's highlight that, okay? When we multiply and divide, we go with fewest number of sig figs. When we add and subtract, we go with the fewest number of decimal places. Whoops, wow, really tired. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here I'm multiplying. I'm going to go with the fewest number of sig figs, which is 2. The rest of it, I just want to sort of keep in my back pocket, but I don't want to round to that many at the end. So I want to try to keep these, and I'm just going to hang on to these for a little bit. And in fact, I don't need all of them, right? I just need one of them. So I could even round this to 5 here and still, but oh, I'm just going to keep them all for now. And then I'm going to do this. So remember, now I'm subtracting, and I have 3 decimal places versus 1 decimal place. So I want to go by decimal places. So I'm just going to keep 1 decimal place. All right, but I kept these numbers to punch into my calculator. So what I'm doing is 19.667 minus 4.9. I'm still using these numbers, 464. I'm keeping it all. That's how I get that number, and then I'm going to round at the very end. That's what that means. All right, good luck.